Cell phones have become the primary battlefield where avoidants wage psychological warfare to maintain control while avoiding genuine connection. The distance that technology provides allows them to manage intimacy with precision impossible in face-to-face interaction, creating elaborate patterns of engagement and withdrawal that keep their targets emotionally destabilized, anxiously attached, and perpetually uncertain about where they stand. These games aren't always conscious manipulation. Many emerge from the avoidance nervous system automatically seeking to maintain optimal distance and control. But whether intentional or unconscious, these cell phone tactics serve the same destructive purpose, keeping you invested and available while preventing the consistent emotional presence that healthy relationships require. Understanding these 5 games reveals how avoidants weaponize modern communication technology, why these tactics are so psychologically effective, and how recognizing the patterns protects you from wasting months or years trapped in dynamics designed to serve their comfort at the expense of your emotional well-being and sanity. Game 1. The Strategic Response Delay. Timing as Emotional Control. The first and perhaps most common game avoidants play through cell phones involves deliberately inconsistent response timing designed to create anxiety and keep you focused on them. They don't just take time to respond, they vary their response times unpredictably, creating patterns where you never know whether you'll get immediate response, hour-long delay, or days of silence. This unpredictability isn't accident or busy schedule. It's strategic maintenance of psychological control through intermittent reinforcement. The avoidant might respond immediately to your first message, creating expectation of availability and engagement. Your nervous system registers this quick response as evidence they're interested and present. But the next message receives no response for hours despite evidence they're active online or have read your message. This shift from immediate to delayed creates cognitive dissonance and anxiety. What changed? Did you say something wrong? Are they upset? The anxiety keeps you fixated on your phone, checking obsessively for their response. The timing patterns often correlate suspiciously with emotional content. Messages that are logistical or casual get relatively quick responses. Messages that express feelings, ask about the relationship, or require emotional vulnerability get significantly delayed responses, or sometimes no response at all. This teaches you that emotional content drives them away, training you to suppress authentic expression in favor of surface-level interaction that feels safer to them. Watch for how they respond to your expressions of missing them or wanting to see them. These vulnerable admissions often trigger extended silence, or very brief, emotionally flat responses that don't match the vulnerability you offered. Miss you too. After 3 hours when you poured out your heart isn't reciprocity. It's minimization designed to discourage future emotional expression while maintaining just enough contact to keep you engaged. The avoidant also uses response timing to train you into pursuing them. When you send multiple messages before they respond, they're learning they can ignore you without consequence because you'll continue reaching out. When you wait patiently for response before sending anything additional, they might actually respond faster because your restraint signals you're pulling back and they need to re-engage you. This dynamic creates a situation where healthy boundary setting actually gets better response than authentic pursuit. Pay attention to patterns around plans or commitments. The avoidant might respond quickly when making plans, but then become difficult to reach when it's time to confirm those plans or when the plans are approaching. This creates a situation where you're never quite sure whether plans will actually happen, keeping you in a state of uncertainty that serves their need for control and escape routes. The strategic delay game also appears through cushioning responses that acknowledge your message without actually engaging with its content. LOL or thumbs up or yeah to your paragraphs communicates they received your message without requiring them to match your effort or engagement. These minimal responses technically maintain contact while demonstrating they're not willing to invest emotional energy reciprocal to yours. Some avoidants will also accidentally take hours to respond, then claim they just saw this, despite evidence of phone activity during that entire period. The obvious lie matters less than the message it sends. Your needs for timely communication don't warrant honesty or priority in their attention. They're training you to accept whatever crumbs of communication they offer without complaint or expectation. Game 2. The ambiguous message, strategic vagueness that creates anxiety. The second manipulative game involves crafting messages that are deliberately ambiguous or incomplete, creating anxiety and uncertainty that keeps you mentally occupied with decoding their meaning while preventing clear understanding of where you stand. The avoidant becomes expert in messages that could mean several different things, allowing them to maintain plausible deniability about their intentions while keeping you invested in figuring out what they really mean. These ambiguous messages often take form of statements that could be either intimate or casual depending on interpretation. Thinking about you could mean they miss you desperately, or it could mean you crossed their mind briefly while they were doing something else. Wish you were here could indicate they want relationship closeness, or simply that they're bored at an event, and your company would be convenient. The ambiguity is the point. It creates engagement without requiring commitment to clear intention. The avoidant also uses unfinished conversations strategically. They'll start discussing something meaningful, then suddenly stop responding mid-conversation, leaving you hanging with unresolved thread that occupies your mind. Did something happen? Did they lose interest? Did you say something wrong? The unfinished conversation creates compulsive need for resolution that keeps you focused on them even in their absence. Watch for messages that raise more questions than they answer. I need to talk to you about something, followed by hours of unavailability, creates significant anxiety. What do they need to talk about? Is something wrong? The vague setup without follow-through is designed to keep you emotionally activated and available rather than to actually communicate something important. When they finally do talk, it's often about something minor that didn't warrant the dramatic setup. The avoidant might also send messages that reference past conversations or inside jokes without context, forcing you to work to understand what they're referencing and what response they're seeking. Remember that thing we talked about? Requires you to search your memory and respond without clear understanding of what they actually want to discuss. This forces investment of mental energy in decoding their communication rather than them being clear. Pay attention to how they respond when you ask for clarification about their ambiguous messages. Do they clarify willingly, or do they become irritated that you're reading too much into things or overthinking? The avoidant who is deliberately being ambiguous will deflect when you seek clarity, because clarity defeats the purpose. They want you uncertain and guessing rather than secure in understanding. Some avoidants use strategic typos or autocorrect accidents to create ambiguity with plausible deniability. A message that seems to say one thing can be dismissed as typo or miscommunication if you respond to it, allowing them to gauge your interest or feelings without risking their own vulnerability. I love spending time with you becomes I liked spending time with you if you respond too enthusiastically. The ambiguous game also includes selective sharing of information about their life, activities, and feelings. They'll mention they did something but not who they were with, creating anxiety about whether they're seeing other people. They'll say they can't hang out because they're busy, but won't specify with what, leaving you to wonder if they're avoiding you specifically or genuinely occupied. The strategic withholding of clarifying information keeps you in state of insecurity. Game 3. The read receipt power play. Visibility as psychological weapon. The third game leverages read receipts and online status indicators to create anxiety and demonstrate control through visible but unanswered communication. The avoidant might have read receipts on, allowing you to see they've read your messages but choosing not to respond, or they'll be visibly active on the platform while ignoring your messages. This visible neglect is more psychologically damaging than simple delay because it proves they're choosing to ignore you rather than being unavailable. The read but ignored message creates specific type of rejection that feels personal and intentional. You know they saw your message. You know they're active on their phone. You can often see them posting on social media or messaging others, yet they're choosing not to respond to you. This visible prioritization of other activities over responding to you communicates clear hierarchy of importance that damages self-worth and creates anxiety about your value to them. Some avoidants strategically toggle read receipts on and off, or switch between platforms to manage what you can see about their activity. They might leave read receipts on for casual conversation, but turn them off when avoiding more serious discussions, making it impossible for you to know whether they've seen emotionally vulnerable messages. This strategic visibility management allows them to control information flow and your emotional state. Watch for patterns where they're active on social media, posting, liking, commenting, but haven't responded to your direct message. This public activity while maintaining private silence sends clear message. They have time and energy for broadcast communication, but not for direct engagement with you. You're not priority even when they're clearly available and using their phone actively. The avoidant might also engage in reply anxiety performance, where they claim overwhelming stress about responding to messages, using this as excuse for delayed or absent communication. But their posting and other online activity belies this claim. They're not too anxious to use their phone, they're too anxious to engage with you specifically. The dishonesty adds insult to the injury of being ignored. Pay attention to whether they respond more quickly or consistently when you pull back versus when you're pursuing. Some avoidants ignore messages when you're reaching out, but respond quickly when you've been silent, revealing their engagement is strategic rather than based on genuine availability or interest. They're managing distance by responding to your level of pursuit rather than communicating from authentic desire to connect. The read receipt game also involves accidentally leaving you on read, then later claiming they meant to respond but forgot or got distracted. This might be true occasionally, but when it's consistent pattern, it reveals someone who doesn't prioritize responding to you even after reading your messages. You're not important enough to warrant follow-through on acknowledged communication. Some avoidants will screenshot or record your messages, then share them with others, violating privacy of your communication while demonstrating your words matter enough to preserve, but not enough to respond to directly. This sharing of your messages without responding to you creates dynamic where you're being discussed, but not engaged with, objectified rather than respected as communication partner. Game 4. The hot-cold text cycle. Engineered emotional whiplash. The fourth manipulative game involves deliberately alternating between warm, engaged messaging and cold, distant communication to create emotional whiplash that keeps you destabilized and focused on regaining the warmth you experienced. The avoidant might be affectionate, flirtatious, and communicative for hours or days, creating sense of closeness and security. Then suddenly, their messages become brief, emotionally flat, and infrequent without explanation for the shift. This cycle serves multiple functions for the avoidant. The warm phase satisfies their need for connection and allows them to feel close without sustained vulnerability. The cold phase protects them when that closeness triggered their defenses or when they need to reestablish emotional distance and autonomy. But for you, the cycle creates addiction to the warm phases and desperate anxiety during cold ones, keeping you perpetually working to restore warmth rather than recognizing the pattern itself as problem. The shifts between hot and cold often correspond to increases in intimacy or vulnerability. After particularly close or vulnerable conversation, the avoidant's next messages might be noticeably colder as their nervous system compensates for the closeness that triggered their defenses. You're punished for emotional intimacy through withdrawal, teaching you that closeness leads to abandonment. Watch for how the avoidant responds to your attempts to address the hot-cold pattern. When you point out they've been distant, do they acknowledge it and explain, or do they gaslight you by claiming you're imagining things or being too sensitive? The dismissal of your accurate observation compounds the manipulation. you're being harmed and then told your perception of harm isn't real. The avoidant might also engineer the cycle deliberately to test your investment. They go cold to see whether you'll pursue, how anxious you become, whether you'll tolerate their withdrawal without complaint. Your response during cold phases provides data about how much they can get away with, whether you'll accept minimal effort, and how much control they maintain despite treating you poorly. Pay attention to whether they provide any explanation for shifts in their communication style. Healthy communication includes explanation. When someone needs to pull back, "I'm overwhelmed with work and need to focus there for a few days," provides context that reduces anxiety. The avoidant who simply shifts from warm to cold without explanation is deliberately leaving you uncertain and anxious as means of maintaining control. The hot-cold cycle also appears through breadcrumbing, sending just enough warm messages to keep you engaged during mostly cold periods. A random affectionate message after days of minimal contact creates hope that warmth is returning and keeps you invested in waiting for full restoration of engagement that never actually comes. The occasional warm crumb prevents you from fully disengaging while never providing consistent warmth. Some avoidants will initiate the warm phase when they sense you're pulling away or moving on, using increased warmth strategically to re-hook your interest. Once they feel confident you're reinvested, the cold phase returns. This reveals their warmth is a performative tool for control rather than authentic expression of feeling. It appears when needed to maintain your involvement and disappears once that's secured. Game 5. The last-minute plan change. Digital flakiness as control mechanism. The fifth manipulative game involves using text communication to be unreliable about plans and commitments, canceling or changing them at last minute through digital message that avoids having to face your disappointment directly. The avoidant confirms plans enthusiastically through text, keeping you excited and preparing, then sends casual message an hour before claiming something came up or they're not feeling up to it. This digital flakiness serves the avoidant's need to maintain escape routes and avoid feeling trapped by commitment while minimizing their exposure to your legitimate disappointment or anger. Canceling via text allows them to avoid seeing your face, hearing the hurt in your voice, or feeling the full weight of how their unreliability affects you. The medium facilitates their avoidance of accountability for impact. Watch for patterns where the avoidant is enthusiastic about plans via text, but then becomes harder to reach as plans approach. They might not confirm final details, might be vague about timing, or might be difficult to reach for hours before you're supposed to meet. This behavior reveals someone creating escape routes and maintaining option to back out without directly canceling. The last-minute cancellation often includes excuse that's difficult to verify or challenge. Not feeling well, something came up with work, family issue. All plausible, but also impossible for you to confirm or deny. The unprovable nature of excuses protects them from accountability while leaving you uncertain whether they're being honest or simply prioritizing their comfort over your plans. Pay attention to whether they offer to reschedule when canceling or whether the cancellation stands without clear commitment to alternative plans. The avoidant who genuinely wants to see you but faces legitimate conflict will immediately propose new time. The avoidant using cancellation as avoidance strategy will be vague about rescheduling, saying things like, "We'll figure out another time," without actually committing to specific alternative. The digital plan change game also includes subtler manipulation, like showing up but being completely checked out on their phone during actual time together, essentially being physically present but emotionally absent. Their constant phone checking, message responding, or social media scrolling during your time together communicates that being with you isn't enough to hold their attention. They need escape even while physically present. Some avoidants will also make plans via text they never intended to keep, using "let's hang out soon" or "we should do X sometime" as filler language that sounds like commitment but isn't. When you try to make concrete plans, they become vague or unavailable. The false commitment keeps you engaged and hopeful without requiring them to actually invest time and energy in seeing you. Protecting yourself from these cell phone games. Understanding these 5 games: strategic response delays, ambiguous messages, read-receipt power plays, hot-cold text cycles, and last-minute plan changes, allows you to recognize patterns that might otherwise keep you confused and emotionally destabilized. Once you see these patterns clearly, you face important choice. Call out the behavior directly and demand change, or recognize these games as evidence of someone incapable of healthy communication and choose to disengage entirely. Calling out the games requires clear, boundaried communication. I notice you often take hours to respond despite being active online. I need more consistent communication. Can you commit to responding within reasonable time frame or letting me know when you won't be available? Their response reveals whether they're capable of change or whether the games are too central to their defensive structure to modify. Most avoidants, when confronted about these patterns, will either deny they're doing anything intentional. You're reading too much into it. I'm just busy. Deflect blame onto you. You're too demanding. You need too much attention. Or make temporary changes that revert quickly to familiar patterns. These responses tell you the games are serving important psychological functions for them that they're unwilling to sacrifice for healthier communication. The healthier choice is often to simply stop playing. Don't respond to ambiguous messages. Require clarity. Don't pursue when they go cold. Match their energy. Don't accept last-minute cancellations without consequences. Stop making plans with unreliable people. Don't obsess over response times. Engage with people and activities that matter rather than waiting for their attention. The games only work if you keep playing. Ultimately, these cell phone games reveal someone using technology to avoid genuine connection while maintaining control over you. Whether intentional manipulation or unconscious defense mechanism, the impact on you is the same: anxiety, destabilization, and erosion of self-worth. You deserve communication that's clear, consistent, and respectful. And if someone can't or won't provide that, the answer isn't to decode their games better, but to remove yourself from dynamics designed to benefit them at your expense.